Hello friends, welcome back to another Tips Tuesday with Let's Flock Together. My name is Michelle and today I will be talking with you about stamping with distressed oxide inks. First I'm going to show you some examples that I have created for you to show you the difference between the Close to My Heart water-based dye inks and the distressed oxide inks and how they stamp next to each other. The Close to My Heart inks, Wildberry and Mink, are similar but not exact to the Picked Raspberry and Antique Linen, but I think you'll get the picture. So here is the sample that I created, and as you can see there are some color differences, but I wanted to be able to show you using some different types of stamps how these stamp together. This brighter pink that you see here on the left side and throughout the example is the Picked Raspberry. The darker is the Wildberry. Now, if you take a look at these images, you can see that there is some differences, but not a ton of differences. So this is the Wildberry, this is the Picked Raspberry, and you can see that both of these stamped this fine line very, very well. You can't see a ton of difference just yet in all of this. So now I did stamp Thanksgiving twice because I didn't stamp very well the first time, but I wanted to show you that these are pretty identical too. There's not a lot of wicking in either one of these, other than where there was a water spot on my paper. Now this Hello Shadow stamp I thought stamped really, really well as well. Now down here, this one here on the left is the Distress Oxide stamped image, and the one on the right is the water-based dye ink image. And I didn't stamp that one very well. I should have stamped it a little bit better. But as you can see, there is a ton of detail in both of these images. You can still see that bullseye on the bottom of the wing, and you can see a ton of detail in the plane and such. And you can actually even see the pilot's face, which I had never actually noticed until I was stamping with this time. So I thought that was really cool. Now on to these. These are the splotches of light from the November stamp of the month. And this first stamp here is just stamped once in each of the colors. Plain and simple, just stamped once. Both of these second ones are spritzed twice with water from about a foot away, and you can see there's a little bit of difference there. This one again stamped just one time, regular, nothing special about it. And then on this second one was also spritzed twice from about a foot away, and there's some differences, but there's not really a whole lot of differences between these two, so it really will depend on the technique you're using and the stamp you're using itself. Now, I did not use any of the black inks on these examples because I have found in the past that the color inks are the ones that are going to give you the most difficulty in the sharpness of your stamping because they tend to wick a little bit more than the traditional black inks do. And so that's why I chose the colors that I did instead of using a black like you might normally use on a project. Overall, I really like how these turned out. Okay, for the next step, I have this panel that is partially blended already. I don't need the whole panel to be covered, and I'm not going to show you how to do this because Danielle went over that in the video that was the first video in this whole series. So I'm going to bring in a piece of scrap paper. I'm going to put it underneath my blended piece here, and I am going to put my deer over top so that I can see where it is that I need to start making my marks for this. Now normally I would tell you you could make little marks on your colored piece. However, I found that with this Distress Oxide background, your pencil does not erase very well, and so you would have to put it on there perfectly, or you can just mark on a scratch piece of paper like I'm going to show you how to do. So I am going to mark here on the right side and the bottom so I know where the piece will line up. They are the same size, the craft piece and the white piece that has a blend on it. And then for the next part, I know that I don't really want to go above about right here. So I'm just going to put a mark on the paper here, and I'll know to line my stamp up right there. So I'm going to take away my craft piece, and I'm going to line up my paper again, and then I'm going to put some washi on there real quick. And that will help keep it in place while I'm stamping and whatnot. So, and this part's not going to be seen, so it doesn't matter if it gets torn off at all. So next we are going to take our Pumice Stone Distress Oxide ink and our tree stamp, and we are going to stamp a line of trees here. And some of this will be fast forwarded, so you don't have to watch it all. And we're just going to vary the heights on all of these trees. And we're just going to make a line across. And you note that all of my trees are at or below that mark there on the right hand side. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to do that whole line first. And then I'm going to go back through and stamp another layer. It's just slightly offset from the ones that we did before. It gives it a second layer of ink and makes it a little bit darker. All right, so I'm using this fabulous stamp chamois. If you don't have one, you should get one. And then let this dry just a smidge. And then I am going to come in with the peeled paint, sorry about that, the peeled paint ink, and I'm going to essentially do the same thing that we just did, but I'm going to come down just a little bit, and I'm going to vary the heights differently than I did for that first layer. And this gets sped up as well, and you'll see that I am also going to do 2 layers of this ink as well. Again, it gives more depth to the whole thing at the very end. Oh, maybe I only did 1 layer of the green. That's okay. All right, so we're going to take this all off, and then we are going to heat set that so that we can continue on really quick. You can see it's shining. That's how you know it's a little bit wet. But the different colors give you the different depths for the outlook that we're looking at. Okay, so now I do have to stamp off screen a little bit because I do have my clouds stamps set up in this stamp positioner. And the way I had my camera set up, I couldn't fit it underneath and close it and use it. So what we are going to do first is we are going to take the same tattered rose that we had at the very top of that blended, and we are going to go direct to stamp with that ink pad. And then we are going to stamp those directly onto that blended background. Put that back on there, rub, 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 rub. And then we will take that off. And when you are looking at this, you can't really see anything on the video, but I promise you there are some clouds there. And if I tip this just right, you can see the wet ink on that paper just a little bit. It does kind of hide away. You can see the top one a little bit better, but we do want to add some more color to the bottom of the bottom cloud. So we are going to take the abandoned coral and our sponge, and we're just going to sponge that very bottom of the cloud, kind of like a sunset. And then we're going to take the sponge for the tattered rose, and we're going to just hit those 2 ends to make sure that there's not any harsh ends on the clouds and the ink colors, so it just is blended a little bit better. We're going to put this back on here, press that down, rub, 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 and we're going to pull that off. And I know you couldn't see those very well. I apologize, having to move everything. So here you can see the bottom of that cloud pretty decently, and it just adds a nice little sunset reflecting off the bottom of the clouds type of look to this panel. So, see, now you can see that really well. Okay, we're going to take everything off and we're going to glue that together to our card front. And then this is what you end up with. You have this fantastic card where you have multiple depths behind the deer. You have the clouds in the sky, and it just has so much depth to it, using those Distress Oxide inks and layering all of those colors together. It gives it just a fantastic look. Now, one of the things that I did find out, and I will include a photo of this in the Facebook group, is that I did not let my layers dry enough before adding the next layer of color. So I had actually a whiteness, the oxidation of the inks come through, and so it changed how the trees looked. They still look really cool, but it wasn't necessarily the look I was going for. So I'll show you how it ended up and a few other samples. But I hope you really enjoy the card that I showed you today, the techniques and the tips that I showed you today. And just keep in mind, if it's super humid where you are, using your Distress Oxide inks is going to affect how your project may turn out, because they are water activated and they do react with other inks as well. So keep that in mind when you are stamping, and I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with too. Thanks so much for playing along. Come back next week for another tip. Thanks. Bye-bye.